What's going on? And this is live. And we have a topic that needs to be brought up here. And this has been something that I have been talking about for years. And it kind of stems from a discussion that came up on the latest boxing podcast that is available on Anchor.fm, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or whatever you use to get your podcast. The latest um, Boxing Source Radio Show podcast. On the last segment of the show, we brought up fantasy matchups. And one of the fantasy matchups that I brought up involved a fighter that, you know, has been viewed as a quote unquote great fighter or an elite fighter or something like that. And I have stated for years that this particular person has been overrated. Um, and he has been viewed as uh, one of the highest rated middleweights in history. And I've kind of said I don't think so. And he has been criticized over the course of his career, professional career, right? And that fighter's name is Gennady Golovkin. And a lot of people are out there that try to defend Gennadyevich Golovkin. And I am here to basically state that Gennady Golovkin is overrated. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is Golovkin has, had this supposed stance of him being this guy that, yo, is supposedly this great middleweight, um, and that he wants quote unquote all the belts, or he wanted to fight um, everyone that was within 154 pounds to 168 pounds. But he basically had not really, he hadn't really backed up those particular words. Now, there have been multiple people that have criticized him over the course of his professional career. And, that includes the likes of Angel Garcia. And that was a long time ago when he basically did that. And I am going to show that here. So I'm going to run this thing real quick.
That's why they ain't got no damn TV no more with nobody. Ain't got no big fights because of that shit. Because the shit they do.
Why
they say all their cars, they got this one coming up. They all from guy. Listen, the guy that fought Gabriel, this guy can't even speak English. He stood in there, yeah, what's his name?
Gennady Golovkin.
Yeah, this guy can't even speak English. This guy stood there talking about, yo, good boy. A good boy. A good boy. They talking about the next superstar of the world. You believe this shit?
Well, they're picking him to beat Andre Ward.
Danny beat Khan, knock him the fuck out cold, hit him here, and have him go like this here. And this motherfucker don't get no props. This motherfucker beat Gabi. He talking about good boy. Good boy. And he's supposed to be the next super champion of the world. the superstar of the world. That's the kind of shit they do. That channel.
They picking him to beat Andre Ward. That's what the world is saying.
He ain't beating Andre Ward shit. Listen, Andre Ward, Showtime made him. Now all of a sudden HBO want to steal him, have him doing all the what they call
commentary.
Yeah, commentary and everything. Now they want to be on Andre Ward's dick. Excuse the words.
Yeah, I know.
Now they want to be on his dick.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Now they want him doing all this thing. But Showtime built him. They didn't want him at the beginning of his career. The same.
Now, you had that had been going on for a good amount of time. So that was like back in 2013 when people were criticizing Gennady Golovkin. But now I got another guest on here. See if we'll talk about this thing with Gennady Golovkin and why Golovkin is overrated. So we got YSM Sports Media on here. YSM, you good?
Yeah. I was going to try to upload a avatar because yours looks so cool. I was gonna try to upload my
the
emblem.
YSM droid. Yeah.
I got to make sure I do that. Why is Triple G overrated? Okay, so where do I go from here? It's so many reasons. All right. Me and you was having a conversation, right? In 2010, Dimitri Pirog knocks out Danny Jacobs, right?
Correct.
2010 knocks out Danny Jacobs.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to fight 3 times. This is around the time where Gennady Golovkin won the WBA, right?
He won the interim WBA middleweight championship.
Yeah, and then he got elevated. Right?
Pretty much elevated to the full title by his next fight.
So in 2010, 2011, he was the full-fledged WBA champ, right?
That's correct.
Where was all the unification talk when it came to Dimitri Pirog? Because I remember him fighting for the vacant WBO, but I don't remember him asking for that smoke when Pirog had the belt for 2 more years.
Yeah, so I was gonna go back down to this is Gennady Golovkin's resume. And we go to, August 14th, 2010, when he fought Milton Nunez for the interim WBA middleweight title. Milton Nunez, this guy, Milton Nunez, who, ended his, record at, 38 and, 24. So that's what we got there. Got another person on here, Unrivaled Boxing Talk. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Just going over the resume of Gennady Golovkin and why he gets too much props for.
Can I say one thing real fast on the resume? Golovkin didn't become the super champion, the full-fledged champion, I believe, until 2013, 2014. The only reason I know it wasn't like pre that is because Felix Sturm was actually the world champion. He was the super champion. So Felix Sturm held super championship status until he lost in the unification to Daniel Giel in 2012.
In 2012, yes, he held the super title. He had been basically the WBA champion, and then he had enough defenses to become super champion, and then he had that fight against Giel where it would have been a unification, but he lost in that unification. But what we're focusing on is with Gennady Golovkin, given that he had a very extensive amateur background, and in a comparison to pretty much more current times, Vasyl Lomachenko, who had that 396-1 amateur record, was able to go in there and get the petition to Bob Arum to kind of get right into the thick of things when it comes to professional boxing and contend for a title within his second or third professional fight. Shout out to GB Boxing in here, referred to through Unrivaled. So peace to GB Boxing.
What's good,
for
you
being
dig?
on here? You know what I mean? And so when we go through this thing in 2010 in particular, you have the, like I was saying here with Gennady Golovkin fighting Milton Nunez for the interim WBA World Middleweight Championship. Milton Nunez, if I could, what I'm going to do is I'll see if I could switch things up here a little bit. Milton Nunez at the time was, competing at super welterweight, so if I could, I'm going to see if I could switch that over to show Milton Nunez's thing here. So Milton Nunez, he had been, fighting these guys that are, had the debut fights 0-2, 0-4, and everything like that. Fought Diego Castillo. Then he fought, Johnny DeHorta, Howard Cassiani, and then Anibal Miranda. So he fought Anibal Miranda for the World Boxing Association Federball Super Welterweight title before fighting Gennady Golovkin for the interim WBA Middleweight Championship.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that that happened there for Milton Nunez, and that was, after he lost to Nelson Julio Tapia back in 2008 for the Fedeletin Super Welterweight title. And Tapia was 7-1-1. Now, why I say that is because when I had the thing up for Gennady Golovkin, right? Golovkin fights Nelson Julio Tapia after fighting Milton Nunez. So both of those guys were at super welterweight before facing Gennady Golovkin. And Nelson Tapia had less experience than Milton Nunez did. And yet Golovkin was able to fight those guys who were moving up in order to, win a middleweight title, while you had on the flip side, Dmitry Pirog facing Daniel Jacobs for the vacant WBO middleweight championship. So I think Unrivaled got disconnected there or whatnot. So I was going to bring up the thing with Dmitry Pirog because, me and YSM talked about the thing with Dmitry Pirog, and he was 20-0. And at 2010, he fought Daniel Jacobs for the vacant WBO middleweight title in July 31st. And then later on down the line, he fought Javier Francisco Maciel. So my thing is that at any point in time during that, 2010 to 2011 period, Gennady Golovkin could have fought Dmitry Pirog, and he didn't end up fighting, Dmitry Pirog. So that's kind of, question.
As a matter of fact, he fought Proska instead of Pirog.
Proska? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like Proska. He was a good prospect.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like it when it
Yeah. Hold on a sec. No, I don't think I'm getting in you here. You still there? Yeah.
I said when the division was up and coming, right? You really didn't hear anything from Triple G. And then when the division got weak, then all of a sudden you started to hear, anybody, good boy, 54.
You good boy.
54 to 168.
Yeah. Yeah, got a brother Koya Media. What's going on?
Yo, what's good?
How you, man?
Yeah, chilling, man, chilling. We're talking about Golovkin and his resume and why, I basically feel that he's overrated.
It's not really his resume that makes me feel like he's overrated. It's his ability. Golovkin, he's a lot like the white Deontay Wilder. Like he's a devastating puncher. He's a hell of a fighter coming forward. He has a lot of little tricks that that offensive tricks that'll get you out of here. But I think Canelo
Mhm.
and even Stevenson when he fought him, a couple of guys have proved, and Danny Jacobs, they proved if you get him,
Curtis Stevens, yeah.
if you get him to take a step backwards, he's average. He's average as hell. He just doesn't fight guys that know how to get him on his back foot. I mean, that's easier said than done, obviously. But he's a pedestrian fighter when he goes backwards, in my opinion. I think he's average. Now, and then also him in his division, Golovkin is a guy that can walk around easily at 185, 190, maybe even 200 pounds. He's not a little guy. So for him to be at 160, just like anyone else who cuts weight real well,
Mm-hmm.
he has an advantage anyway. But I think he's a strong guy at 200 pounds. That's the difference. He's not a weak guy at 200 that comes down to 160 and is a god. He's a strong guy at 200 that comes down to 160 and is just ridiculous. He's sort of like Trinidad when Trinidad was fighting at 147. And he's a left-handed fighter. Trinidad was left-handed, so his left hook was ridiculous. He was killing guys because he really was a middleweight that was left-handed, hitting guys at 147 with that left hook. He was knocking guys' heads off. And I think Golovkin has that same kind of effect where he does hit hard. He is a power puncher, but other than Canelo, and I think Canelo dealt with him both fights, in my opinion. But other than Canelo, I haven't seen him against anybody who I would say, well, Danny Jacobs as well. I'll give him his credit.
Yeah.
Hey, Darius, Derevyanchenko beat his ass.
That's one fight I didn't even watch that fight, to be honest with you. I haven't seen the I didn't see that.
Man, yo,
but I didn't hear about it. I heard he got an ass whooping, but I wasn't surprised.
Well, I mean, after that first round knockdown that Golovkin scored, man, like you talk about, hey, you said, he's basically a straightforward fighter and that he doesn't, fight backwards. Floyd Mayweather said that Golovkin is straight up and down, no special effects. But in that Derevyanchenko fight, hey, man, he was packing Golovkin up, bro. He was
how you beat him.
Up. And then me and Wes and Jamil here, we're talking about, there was one time when Golovkin got hurt and then the referee had to step in to break it up. So
he was gonna get stopped. He was gonna get stopped. I promise you. You go home, watch the tape.
I'm gonna break it down now that y'all said it. I'm about to break it down and prove it for you. I'm gonna break the film down today.
When you see the ref jump in, you gonna be like, "Whoa, what is going on?"
Why would you jump in there? Yeah, it wasn't a stop in the action. It wasn't like the tape wasn't coming off or nothing.
They tried to say it was low. Is that what they did, Jay?
It was like some type of low blow or something.
Yeah, it's like no, he was ready.
Wasn't acting like there was no low blow.
He was ready to go. He was ready to go. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He had that look and that leg wobble. You know what that leg wobble means?
Yeah. He was doing the stinky leg, man. He was doing the stinky leg against Derevyanchenko, man. But yeah, like GB Boxing said, man, HBO sold Golovkin brilliantly, and when I open this live stream up, I put up the clip with Angel Garcia talking about how HBO sold Golovkin. He talk about, like you said, "Who go boy?"
Right.
Good boy.
Right.
When Danny Garcia was on HBO at one point, but they didn't, boost Garcia up when he had resumes that he had at 140 pounds.
That's because the difference between Golovkin and Garcia, they wanted Garcia to be an opponent, and he just happened to keep winning. He just kept winning. He wasn't supposed to win those fights, so they weren't ever trying to get behind Garcia. He was meant to be just a name, and he just ended up, fighting his way into stardom.
Yeah, like I said, he fought Khan. He fought Maidana.
Right.
This is before they had the that tournament.
No, he didn't fight Maidana.
He fought Matisse.
Matisse. Well, Matisse, yeah, he did fight Matisse.
But wait, before that, he fought a bunch of fights that he wasn't supposed to fight, like your Nate Campbell,
Kendall Holt, Eric Morales,
Ashley Theopine. Those are all tough guys that you're not supposed to put your golden goose prospect against.
Like he fought guys like Theophane, like I said, Nate Campbell, Kendall Holt. All of that at 140 pounds, man. Like you talking about,
Kendall Holt
he had a resume. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and HBO was like, invested in that thing with Gennady Golovkin and who was it? There was like some Chinese dude that they were trying to push too
Yeah,
at
at
that
that time. I remember
and
the
yeah,
Olympian guy. Yeah.
yeah. So that was the thing with that one, man. They just overblown the thing with Gennady Golovkin and I said like earlier, it's funny because they talk about these guys that have this extensive amateur background. And you bring up someone like a Vasyl Lomachenko,
Right.
when Gennady Golovkin had a very extensive amateur background, but when he started as a professional, they brought him up, really slowly.
Yeah.
Um, and I was saying like when he fought for the interim WBA championship, he fought a guy that was at super welterweight. Then he
Right.
fought another guy that was at super welterweight to win the full WBA title. And then as a follow up, he fought Kasim Uma, who was another guy that was at 154 pounds. And so you
And
can
easy to
include,
hit.
yeah, yep, and you include the guys like Gabe Rosado or Nobuhiro Ishida, and that was the thing with that. And you know how they wanted to protect him when they were talking about him fighting Andre Ward at 168, and apparently he was not a good boy.
Yeah.
So Gennady Golovkin didn't want to fight him at 168 pounds. But on the flip side, later on in Golovkin's career, he fights a guy in Kell Brook who was at 147 pounds.
How you call a dude out while he's in recess, so to speak, going through promotional issues and injuries, and then when he come back, so no, it's too much.
No, too big. Like like I guess he wasn't a good boy when he was um at full at full strength. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was nothing on it.
Yo, real fast, I'm gonna name 5 guys that Triple G never fought at 160, and you just tell me why, yo. Kobarov, Andy Lee, John Jackson, Peter Quillen, P-Rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you two of the ones that you mentioned.
I think Quillen had the power to back him up, but I think he beats Quillen. That was about it.
Yeah, I think Quillen like leaves himself open too much.
Yeah, he got too much bravado. He like Curtis Stevenson, just bigger. He gonna try to fight you, and he need the box, but he'll try to fight you.
Yeah, that's why he got caught by Jacobs.
Jacobs ended up getting Triple G, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, because he ended up beating Quillen, and then beat. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because that was for the either the interim title or the regular title there for Daniel Jacobs. So he defeated Peter Quillen. Actually, it was for the regular title, and Golovkin was the super champion at that particular time. And so what happened was they were trying to have that fight made, and Golovkin's team didn't want to really pay Daniel Jacobs, but they had to because he was the the regular champion. So,
yeah, and then that's why they had to make it a pay-per-view fight, right?
Yep, that's why they had to make it a pay-per-view fight, because they had to get the extra money in order to, fulfill the total purse for that particular fight. But we saw what happened there. I felt that Daniel Jacobs, outboxed Golovkin, but at that particular time, that was when they were supposed to have that first fight between Golovkin and Canelo. So they really couldn't make that fight be put into place. Let me see here. You got Santos Romo on here, man. Peace to Romo. So he says that Ward sent a contract over when Golovkin had that fight with David Lemieux.
The fight was supposed to be after Lemieux. That's what a lot of people don't realize.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is that they were supposed to have an both were gonna have an interim fight, and then it was at 168, right?
Yeah.
Fellas, I'm almost to my little get together. I'm gonna have to jump off, but I appreciate you inviting me on, and please invite me on again, man. I got nothing else to do but talk boxing. You know, I'll get back on.
Well, I might have one more topic on for tonight. So, but thanks for coming on there, brother.
No problem. Nice meeting you, bro. Thanks,
All
Phil.
right.
Appreciate it.
All right, dude.
Yeah. Now, Santos Romo also was saying like Dmitry Pirog had that back injury, and when he was going to fight Andy Lee, Golovkin's father passed away. So there was that point. But the thing was, it was like after that, what happened to that fight? You know?
Wait, can I address Santos real fast?
Yeah.
All right, so P-Rock had a back injury it was either a back or a neck, I can't remember, in 2012. But from 2010 on to 2012, why couldn't that fight get made, Santos? That's what I'm saying. After he beat Danny Jacobs, why couldn't that fight get made? He fought Grigorski Praska, and then with Andy Lee, the fight was already signed. Triple G pulled out the fight because his dad had passed. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, why didn't you go and fight him right after that?
Well, you see, the thing this is crazy because
like you pulled out the fight.
They put Dmitry Pirog out there. They sent him back to Russia with that WBO title, man. Like, come on, man. Like, yo, like it beats Daniel Jacobs over at the Mandalay Bay. Then they have him back in Russia to fight and defend those titles, like over in Ekaterinburg and Krasnodar and over in Moscow. Like he beats Ishida, man. Like, let me see. Wait a minute, Ishida. Who did he fight before that? Because he said he lost. So, he lost to Paul Williams. That's what it was. He lost to Paul Williams. So he fought. That's crazy. Look at this, man. So Ishida fights Paul Williams. Then he fights Dmitry Pirog, and then he fights Gennady Golovkin. Man, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, that is crazy.
You know, that's almost like
who's managing, dude?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I just don't know. But you go into like the whole thing with Golovkin. Like you said, we were talking about the point in 2010 and 2011 when he fought three guys that were, former 154-pound fighters. And then his first quote-unquote unification fight was against Lawan Simon for the IBO middleweight title. And then he has his fights with Makoto Fujigami.
Come on, man.
Gregos Proxa, Gabe Rosado, Nobuhiro Ishida. Matthew Macklin, that was okay, but Matthew Macklin had lost twice, 2 of the last 3 fights before, going up against Golovkin, where he fought, he lost to Sturm and he lost to Sergio Martinez. He got stopped by Sergio Martinez at that particular time. Then you have Curtis Stevens, then Adama Osmanu.
If you think about it, right? he called it. It was proven that when he was calling out Serge, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were saying Serge was ducking him, and then you see another interview that said, "Well, technically Sergio isn't ducking us; he just wasn't available." Like Serge was battling injuries,
right?
And then coming back, he had a home fight. I guess who was that? Matthew Macklin, right?
Yeah, I think it was Macklin.
Had a home fight with Matthew Macklin, and then he did it, the cash out. The cash out with
Cotto. Yeah.
So like he wasn't really available for you to fight.
Yeah. I mean,
because he had two injuries that kept him out for like at least a year apiece. 2 ACL injuries.
Yep.
So and then like you said, you pulled out of the Andy Lee fight. And then you never revisited it.
You never revisited it. Never.
And I'm trying to think, it was somebody else that wanted to fight him that he wasn't interested in because Jacobs was a Mando. He didn't really want
it was like a semi-Mando, yeah, because with him being the regular champion and Golovkin being the super champion, that's when they tried to consolidate everything. But yeah, the thing with Sergio, like he had those issues, but after the Martin Murray fight, then he had the fight with Cotto, and that's when he was dealing with those leg injuries. And we knew about what Freddie Roach was saying. It was like, yo, we gotta get Sergio Martinez now, and so he knew that Sergio Martinez was dealing with that leg injury. So it basically got him and was able to win that title. Let's see. Santos says that the Andy Lee fight wasn't made because he believes that he lost to Billy by that time, Billy Joe Saunders.
No. No, the Andy Lee fight. The Andy Lee fight wasn't even a unification bout.
Yeah,
Andy Lee hadn't won. Andy Lee hadn't won his belt yet, bro.
Right. Like Andy Lee was the WBO champ.
After he knocked Quillen vacated because of the Rock Nation issue. He knocked out Kobarov.
Kobarov, yes.
The vacant.
Yep.
Ford had a draw with Peter Quillen, and then ended up losing to Billy.
Yep.
But that was the Triple G thing was supposed to come around the time of John Jackson.
Yeah.
Or like right after that. So Andy Lee hadn't even become champion yet.
Yeah, Andy Lee hadn't become champ. So that fight between Lee and Golovkin, basically could have happened at that particular point. There was like the other thing too with Golovkin and going into how he's basically overrated. How he kind of like hustled, and this goes into the whole thing with him being protected by HBO, and I couldn't understand this for the life of me. We talk about Cotto when he defeated Sergio Martinez for the WBC title. If I go back to Golovkin's resume there, right? So around 2014 was when Cotto won that title. But here you had Golovkin fighting the Curtis Stevens, Adama Usmanu, and Daniel Gill. And then he fought Marco Antonio Rubio for the interim WBC middleweight title.
Now, hey, Santos, if you're there, Rubio though, bro. Now, mind you, I think Triple G's a good fighter, but Rubio, bro, Curtis Stevens, that's a solid fight. But go ahead, Rubio. I'm about to.
Here's the thing. But here's the thing with Rubio. Rubio was fluctuating in between middleweight and super middleweight at that time. Number one. But number two, this is how I don't know how K2 what's the guy's name for K2? I keep forgetting the main promoter's name for this because he was the one that backed Golovkin and the Klitschko brothers and all of that. So they were able to have Tom Loeffler is the guy's name. Tom Loeffler. He was able to have Golovkin fight Marco Antonio Rubio for the interim WBC middleweight championship while he was a world champion. Now, I don't know if Santos or Kenneth that's watching right now, if y'all could do me a favor. I have this question. I've asked this question for years and I've never really had an answer yet. Can anyone tell me when a fighter that has held multiple world championships was able to fight someone else for an interim title? I've never seen it. Me personally, I've never seen it. So I'm asking for somebody to tell me if there was another fighter that was a world champion, whether unified or not, was able to fight someone else for an interim championship in order to become the mandatory contender for the world champion at that time.
The only dude I've ever seen it done around that time, I don't know if he fought for interim, was when Sergey Kovalev
Kovalev,
became
but
became
I
the
didn't
Mando
think,
for Stevenson.
yeah, for Mando, but I didn't think that was for the interim WBC title at that particular time. So that's what that I was like told that was pretty much comparable. But I don't like know like who in particular was the guy that um he fought. He fought for the diamond heavyweight title against Jean Pascal in 2015. But that was not even that was after he fought Bernard Hopkins, because they were trying to have Stevenson and Hopkins fight. But with the whole thing with him and with Stevenson and Kovalev, that's when Stevenson went over to Showtime, and as a result, that's why Kovalev ended up fighting Hopkins over in Atlantic City. There, you know what I mean? So, nah, the Joshua fight, that Joshua fight was for the vacant WBA Super Championship. Because remember, Vladimir Klitschko was supposed to have a rematch with Tyson Fury at that time. And since Tyson Fury wasn't coming back, they had relinquished all of those titles. And so that's when the WBA made the decision to have Joshua Klitschko for the vacant WBA Super Championship. So that was, something separate. But going back to Gennady Golovkin, he gets that fight with Marco Antonio Rubio and wins the interim WBC title in order to call a mandatory. And at the time, Miguel Cotto was like, I'm setting up to fight Canelo Alvarez. And then that was basically the biggest fight that could be made at that division. So when they were setting up for that fight, they had, the whole thing about, of course, sanctioning fees or whatever it is to hold the title and all of that. But Cotto was saying, okay, I'm going to pay such and such for, to step aside in order for me to fight Canelo. And then you had the whole thing with the percentage for fighting for the WBC title. So it's a percentage of the purse that Cotto was going to make. And he was like, y'all gonna take this much out of my purse for this? He's like, nah, I'm good. Y'all go ahead and keep this belt. I got a version of the belt anyway, so keep the belt. I'm not gonna defend it. And so Canelo ended up winning that title, the WBC title at the time. And with Golovkin being the interim WBC champion, they moved quickly to try to make that fight. And they knew that, because I'm the interim WBC champion, I could get this type of percentage, 55-45 split. So they wanted to go ahead and invoke that purse bid, where Golovkin would get 45% and Canelo would have 55%. And so Canelo was like, man, you ain't really done nothing. You like your resume is trash up to this particular point, and you want to go ahead and have this fight between me and you where you get 45%. Nah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to ditch the belt. And so he ended up ditching the belt, while Gennady Golovkin was fighting Dominic Wade on April 2016. And Dominic Wade was like the second rated contender for the IBF middleweight title, because
Torino Johnson got hurt.
Yeah, Torino Johnson got hurt. That's right. And so that's when that particular fight happened. And then months later, you had Gennady Golovkin saying that he could that they were talking about him potentially fighting Kell Brook. And he was like, no, 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 too small, too small. And then he ends up fighting. We got a question up here from Kenneth Supreme McGriff. Peace to Kenneth McGriff. How would you think a prime Jermaine Taylor and a Kelly Pavlik would have done against Gennady Golovkin? Golovkin versus Pavlik would be a good fight, though. It would be a good fight.
I think he stops Taylor.
Yeah.
Pavlik, I don't know, because Pavlik is a big dude.
Yeah, man, Pavlik's big. And the thing about it is that, you know, with Pavlik, Hopkins was just a master boxer, so he could, you know, do what he does. But Pavlik, like you said, is a big dude. So I don't know, man. That would have been a barn burner of sorts with that. You know what I mean? So that's a good question there, Kenneth McGriff. Yeah, going back to the thing with Kell Brook.
Yeah,
at first he was saying it was too small, and then he ends up fighting, you know, for the WBC middleweight title, and that's like his first defense of that WBC title against Kell Brook. And so he has that, and then the next fight is against Daniel Jacobs. Now, I think by that time they pretty much secured the fight between him and Canelo Alvarez. So one, they didn't want to mess up that money. Daniel Jacobs boxed his ass off in that particular fight. He had his little struggle in the fourth round where he got knocked down, and in the fifth round, Gennady Golovkin got the best of him in that fifth round. But other than that, Daniel Jacobs was there toe to toe with Gennady Golovkin, and they just ended up giving him the decision. And so you had that, and then also there was that point where Billy Joe Saunders said, "Hey, I want to go ahead and face Gennady Golovkin," but they didn't want to make that fight happen at that time because they didn't want to potentially mess up the fight between Golovkin and Canelo in September of that year. So you did have that, you know what I mean? But following that first fight between Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez, where it was a draw, they were supposed to have the rematch, an immediate rematch on Cinco de Mayo in 2018 over in Las Vegas. And we had the whole thing with the clenbuterol with Canelo Alvarez and whatnot. So they knew that they wouldn't have the fight on May 5th, 2018. But Golovkin had his IBF mandatory due. And his IBF mandatory at the time was Sergey Derevianchenko. And it was like, hey, we calling that mandatory because you're going to have to come through and fight Sergey Derevianchenko. And he didn't ended up doing that. Hold on, Santos. Hold on, Santos, real quick. Hold on, Santos. Santos, we got the link right here to see if you can join in. So if you're able to copy that link or type that URL, you can basically do that. Or you know what? I'm going to post it on here once again. So bear with me just a second. And there you go. So the link is there in the chat right now.
Hey Jay, I gotta go. I'll be back though in a little bit.
All right, gotcha. All right, so going back to this time, Cinco de Mayo weekend, man, and for me, man, I was looking forward to it too, man. I was planning the trip over to Las Vegas. It was going to be the rematch. I had actually, booked the tickets and everything. You know what I mean? He had booked the tickets and everything in March, had the hotels and all of that. And then I was like, man, they canceled the fight. And I was like, oh, man. But since they had canceled the fight, and Tom Loeffler and Gennady Golovkin said that they wanted to still have a fight on that date. So they went on ahead and scheduled something for Carson, California, in StubHub Center. And the thing was, it was the IBF called their mandatory, which at the time was Sergey Derevianchenko. And remember, they were having that, and then also Demetrius Andrade was calling out Gennady Golovkin at that particular time. Let's see here. All right, yeah, it's pretty much connecting, right? So, all right, you should be good to go. Um, so I guess Sergey Derevianchenko and Demetrius Andrade weren't good boys. So since they weren't good boys, they ended up choosing Baines Martirosyan for Golovkin to fight on Cinco de Mayo weekend over in Carson, California. And since that didn't suffice for the IBF, they ended up stripping Gennady Golovkin of the IBF middleweight title. Real quick, just check in to make sure he's connected all good. Santos, what's good with you? Santos, you there with us? Oh, yeah, I'm not necessarily getting you here. Shout out to Leonard Heller. Please, no, so no. Yo, that's one of the craziest screen names that I've seen here, man. Leonard Heller, Leonard Heller, please. Yo, thanks, man. Thanks. Oh man, yo. Oh goodness, yo. All right, let's see it here if he gets Santos can still connect here, seeing if we could get that connection working for Santos as he tries to get back on. So let's see if we could try this once again. Santos, you there with us? Uh, hey man, I'm still not hearing them. Yeah, man, it looks like the connection's not good there, but yo, shout out to Leonard Fella Peach Nose. Yo, um, yeah, going back to the whole thing with Gennady Golovkin at that particular time, Cinco de Mayo weekend, 2018, and they choose to fight Baines Martirosyan. Baines Martirosyan, if y'all think back to the time when he was active at 154 pounds. All right, Santos, no problem there, Santos. Um, he was at 154 pounds. He had, I think he was part of that triple header at 154 over in, I think it was, yeah, in Las Vegas. And he had that that fight between him and Erislandy Lara. And at that time when he fought Lara and lost, there was a little bit of a conflict of sorts between him and I think it was Al Heyman or whatnot. So he got put on ice, and he wasn't able to get back into the ring until he goes and fights Gennady Golovkin. So I guess Vance Martirosyan was a good boy, and we saw what happened in that particular fight over at Carson, California. The co-feature bout that was on that card over in Carson, California with Kali Reyes and Cecilia Brækhus. That one was a pretty good fight there. You know what I mean? But Golovkin versus Vegas Martirosyan as a main event, man. That's kind of a little bit of a issue there. Let's see. I think Santos is. You know, try that thing one more time with Santos, man. thinking in like part of a video thing, but not necessarily the audio or whatnot. Seeing if you're able to talk here, I'm not quite getting you. So looks like a little bit of a connection issue is going on with this thing. So here's the thing, this thing on that. He's not. Yeah, I'm not able to hear you all the way through. On there, Santos. So I'm not sure if you're trying to get through on the phone. If you have like your laptop available, you may be able to get through from your laptop. So yeah, try that out as well. Oh yeah. That was the other one too. I forgot about that. You're right. Yeah. 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 Golovkin was supposed to fight Munguia too, and then I guess Munguia was supposed to be another good boy at 154 pounds. All right, Santos. I'm gonna see how long we'll be on there with it. Yeah, man. Munguia was supposed to be a good boy too. He was supposed to be a good boy. And the Nevada State Athletic Commission vetoed it. But you see what happened, man. Munguia fought Saddam Ali, who beat Miguel Cotto, and he beat Saddam Ali from pillar to post. Oh God. Oh, I don't know how to be able to do it. Munguia out, man. Munguia wasn't he wasn't even, anywhere near where he is now. And even now, I don't really, put him up there as far as like, high regard within 154 and now 160 pounds. So man, I think at that particular term, even with the Nevada State Athletic Commission not going through with that particular fight, that ended up working for Munguia. He ended up getting the WBO super welterweight title or light middleweight title or whatever they call it. You know what I mean? And he was able to defend that WBO title a few times. You know, so you had that, and going back to Golovkin, he does have that fight with Lanes Martirosyan, who was a good boy. But as a result, he has the IBF middleweight title stripped, and that is, basically how Daniel Jacobs was able to fight for it against Sergey Derevyanchenko later in that year. And then you have the rematch between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin. And Gennady Golovkin ends up losing to Canelo Alvarez by decision. Now, the thing about that second fight was there was a lot of animosity towards both guys leading into that particular fight. The contract wasn't agreed to until like I guess the last minute or something like that. And it kind of stems from before they tried to make that fight happen. So remember in that first particular fight when they were trying to make it up, when Gennady Golovkin became the interim WBC champion, they tried to force a purse bid to get a 55-45% split. And Canelo was like, nah, son, you ain't getting no 45%. Screw you, I'm Canelo. So he ended up throwing away the belt, right? So in that first fight, before the first fight in September of 2017, they pretty much went back and forth as trying to get the agreement then. Then in 2018, they were doing the same thing. So that is why Canelo was really, really pissed off and upset at Gennady Golovkin because he felt that Golovkin was asking for too much money. Real quick, Santos says he'd like to see Charlo and Andrade. I pick Andrade to beat him. Man, they need to go ahead and just make that unification fight, man. Let me tell you something. The Charlo brothers, man. I'm sorry, man, but for a while I've called the Charlo brothers the Migos of boxing. The Migos of boxing. Because they kind of like are too brash and too out there, talk way too much trash, and don't really have that type of resume that you know people would be able to respect. I remember with Jamal Charlo tried to talk some trash years ago to Daniel Jacobs, and then when they were in the I think it was the Barclays Center or something, and Daniel Jacobs was like, "What we have here? Hey, so you were talking about you talking some trash saying that you want to fight or something like that. Well, what's good then? What's good?" And Jamal Charlo was like, yeah, yeah, it's all good, man. It's all good. It's like, yo, it's like you ain't even touched nothing. I'm touching M's right now. And Charlo's like, yo, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. But they still, this didn't have a fight between each other before. Daniel Jacobs ended up moving up to where he is now, super middleweight. You know, um, nah, nah. So Jamel Charlo is still the WBC. Well, is now the WBC uh, junior middleweight champion or super welterweight champion. He did have that fight there with Tony Harrison in 2018. Lost to Tony Harrison because remember they were supposed to have a unification fight between Jamel Charlo and Jared Hurd. And at the end of 2018, at the end of 2018, you had the fight between Jamel Charlo and Tony Harrison, and Jared Hurd was there in attendance, and Tony Harrison ended up winning by decision, and so that kind of like screwed things up. And then later on down the line, over in Fairfax, Virginia, you had Jared Hurd losing to Julian J. Rock Williams, right? Okay, I see what you're saying there, Kenna. Oh man. Um, so yeah, you had the whole thing with J. Rock Williams and Jared Hurd, and they were supposed to have a rematch. And Jared Hurd said, "You know what? I'm cool right now. I'm gonna, do my own thing." Jared Hurd, my guy, man. Have a interview with him a few years ago when he had those plans to, eventually unify, and then after unify, moving up to 160 pounds, but his loss to Julian J. Rock Williams delayed those plans. But going back to the thing with Canelo and Golovkin, second fight, um, Canelo was just pissed off, man. He was pissed off that Gennady Golovkin was getting all of these benefits, so to speak, and he didn't want anything to do with Gennady Golovkin. Um, so when they had that second fight, and he was, able to get the win over Gennady Golovkin, he didn't want anything to do with Gennady Golovkin after that point. So the whole thing with HBO, that was their last pay-per-view, HBO pay-per-view. Canelo gets his, his deal with DAZN, where DAZN pretty much got hustled a little bit on that deal. It got hustled. So you have Gennady Golovkin there, and later on down the line, after Canelo gets his deal with DAZN, then Golovkin gets his deal with DAZN. And the thing with that is DAZN, after realizing what they did with Canelo Alvarez, they're like, oh shoot, we're locked into this deal with Canelo Alvarez where we have to pay him up to $365 million over the course of 11 fights. Now, you have the first fight in that deal for Canelo was Rocky Fielding in December. And of course, it's over there in the MSG. So there's one instance where I guess they try to do something with that in order to get initial subscribers to DAZN. But the next fight is against Daniel Jacobs in May of 2019, and then after that, you have the whole thing going on between Canelo and Golden Boy Promotions, and that's why they're having a rift now. And then he eventually ends up fighting Sergey Kovalev. So now we fast forward into now where they're like, okay, we've had 3 fights in the deal. There's 8 fights left, and he's making an average of 33 million a fight or so. And those 3 fights, they're not getting the returns on those 3 fights that they, want to get. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to pick Canelo up there against guys that, maybe give a better type of a matchup. You know what I mean? So that's why they tried to, have this thing here initially with Billy Joe Saunders. And if you see on Boxing Scene, I think it was like last week or something like that, they had the plan out of his fight schedule for this year. Because, like I said, they're locked in with the deal that they have with DAZN. So it's Billy Joe Saunders, then Gennady Golovkin, and then Ryota Murata. So they recently have signed a deal for Canelo Alvarez to fight Gennady Golovkin on September 12, 2020. But real quick, it got Mike G on with me. We're talking about Gennady Golovkin and why Golovkin is overrated. Went through most of his resume from the point that he won the interim WBA title up to pretty much current times. So what are your thoughts about Gennady Golovkin?
I think if you compare him to other higher level fighters, your statement could be legitimate. Yes. At the same time, he is a probably lower A level fighter, high B, lower A level fighter. So he'll beat a lot of guys, if not most guys, but the upper echelon is where he will have problems. I think I heard you say, you and somebody else say, I was watching in the background for a long time, but if you move him back, then he has problems. So that's his Achilles heel. If you are like a exceptional fighter and you commit to moving him back, then you have success. Willie Monroe did it, but he couldn't sustain it. Like he was moving him back, but mentally he didn't understand what he was doing. But I'm sure after people saw what he eventually did, it that's when people started being more freer to do that. That's probably why Kell Brook got the gonads to try to do it as well too. So, and Kell Brook to some extent did it too, right?
Yep. To an extent, because he was, outboxing Gennady Golovkin, man. I mean, to me, if it wasn't, him coming up 2 divisions at the time to, go after Gennady Golovkin, if they had gradually moved him up and he still, kept his skills and everything like that, he would have gave Gennady Golovkin real problems because he was not that much of a good boy for Gennady Golovkin, man. So
I probably ain't gonna stay on for the full show, by the way. I don't know how long you've been on.
Yeah, well, it's been pretty much over an hour here so far.
Oh, wow.
Because I've had, various guests and whatnot. But that was the thing that we had there with Kell Brook, and then like I was saying, fast forward to the second fight between Canelo and Golovkin. Canelo won that fight. He didn't want anything to do with Gennady Golovkin after that. So they had the whole deal with DAZN, and later in 2019, DAZN was like, "Hey, we gonna have to do something because now we got Canelo locked for 8 or 9 fights at that particular time, and we got to find out who he's going to be able to fight in those 9 fights." So they know that at that particular time, the biggest fight that they could make for Canelo Alvarez is Gennady Golovkin, even though Canelo didn't want to do anything with Gennady Golovkin. So they went ahead and they signed Gennady Golovkin. And the first fight that Gennady Golovkin has is against Steve Rolls. Sorry, man. Damn, man. Shoot. Steve Rolls, man. All right. So he has that fight with Steve Rolls. Steve Rolls is a good boy. I think, Gennady Golovkin had his first fight with Jonathan Banks as his trainer because he let go of Abel Sanchez. God dog it. Abel Sanchez. And so he was doing a couple of things there. He was incorporating a couple of new punches and whatnot, like it was like a punch where he starts upward and then goes downward with the punch. I'm not sure if y'all saw that. Like he would like start up and then go down and land on the top of his head. But Steve Rolls was a good boy.
The reverse uppercut.
Yeah, reverse uppercut. Yep. So he was a good boy. Steve Rolls gets stopped. And so they had moved on to another fight. And so that came at the point where Canelo Alvarez was looking for another fight to have after defeating Daniel Jacobs for the IBF middleweight championship. And so then you had Sergey Derevyanchenko be the mandatory for the IBF title once again. Like he had one fight, it became the IBF mandatory again. And so they were pretty much trying to figure out what would be next for Canelo Alvarez. Not necessarily like pinpointing the time frame for this, but they had possibly the unification match between Canelo and Andre, but they didn't go through with that. Then they had the whole back and forth about trying to secure a fight between Canelo Alvarez and Sergey Derevyanchenko, and that was the whole thing with him and the matchmaker saying, "Oh, okay, we're gonna make the fight," and then they ended up not making the fight, forcing Canelo to have that IBF belt stripped, and that's where Canelo got pissed off because he's like, he doesn't want to like give up belts that way, So you had that, and then he ends up going to move up to light heavyweight to fight Sergey Kovalev for that WBO light heavyweight title. Real quick, got Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News back with us. What's going on?
Yeah, not much, man. I had to do a few things.
Yeah,
Can
man.
you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I sent a few people over, so I hope like you got a few views out of it.
Okay, thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot. Yo, real quick, y'all go ahead. If y'all haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News for more boxing content. So yeah, going into that whole thing with Canelo, and he ends up fighting Kovalev. And so we go back to Golovkin, and Golovkin has his fight with the good boy Steve Rolls. And then after that, they have the thing arranged for him to fight Sergey Derevyanchenko for the vacant IBF and vacant IBO middleweight titles. And that is, over at Madison Square Garden on October 5th. And Sergey Derevyanchenko wasn't a very good boy.
What a good fight, by the way. What a good fight.
It was a very good fight, man. That was like, that's probably, 2019, man. 2019
really good fights,
had
man.
a good amount of fights in 2019.
Well, you
Man,
had
like
Spence Porter, Triple G, Derevianchenko. You had a new
ooh,
way there. What else?
Nair,
Taylor
Joshua
Prograis.
Ruiz won.
Taylor
Taylor
Prograis.
Prograis.
Yeah.
You had
J Rock Horde.
Ramirez, J Rock Hurd, Ramirez versus Hooker. Like
Pacquiao Thurman was a good fight as well.
Thurman, yep. Like, man,
Great year.
There was like
Great
a list.
year.
There was like a list of like 10 fights or so, 10 plus fights that were like, my goodness, that was like, man, I don't know. Like, there was probably not a fight year like that since like maybe 2013 or something like that. You know?
Let's continue on topic.
Yeah. So you had the fight between Golovkin and Derevianchenko, and after the first round, Derevianchenko wasn't a very good boy. he gave Golovkin hell, man, and he ended up getting the decision out of that, where a good amount of people thought that Derevianchenko got the win. So now you get to the end of the year, and Golovkin pretty much didn't have much of a plan other than having a quick defense against the mandatory for the IBF title, the new mandatory.
I would like to speak on the Derevianchenko fight. One thing I will say is that Derevianchenko definitely had Golovkin looking he looked very different. He looked like a fighter who, I'm not going to say he wanted to quit, but he looked like he had never really faced that type of adversity before, and so he was digging deep.
Correct.
But if I remember correctly, so the first part of the fight I remember, the middle part, Derevianchenko was like hitting him with everything. Golovkin's body language was just weird, and then toward the end he regrouped and he finished. I'm not gonna say he finished strong like a la Andre Ward against Sergey Kovalev, but he finished respectable. I'll say that. So he was challenged and he didn't fold per se, because he still, even though like he was
the first Roy Jones Antonio Tarver fight.
Roy Jones Tarver?
Yeah.
Let me remember what happened. Didn't Roy Jones got off first most of the time, right?
Yeah. I think he had a good start in the first half of that fight, and then Tarver, pretty much got a little bit better on him, and then Jones had to come back basically.
Yeah.
So you had the fight there with Derevianchenko, and immediately after that fight, Tom Loeffler and Gennady Golovkin were like, no, we need to find some more good boys. We need to find them. So they were planning on having him take on
Camille Cesare-Meta.
Yes.
Camille Cesare-Meta. So.
That was the next planned mandatory. And the thing about it was like, you didn't have to fight a mandatory for another 12 months. So why are you going into an immediate fight against the mandatory contender? Man, that was just something. But, now
can I say why? Yeah, I'll give the reason why. This is according to Loeffler anyway, because they were looking to have the Canelo and Triple G fight in September, right? So if Triple G were locked into a mandatory directly after that fight, if he were to win against Canelo, he couldn't go into a unification. So what they were planning to do was take on their mandatory, and then that wouldn't be due for another year after that point. So roughly in around June. Then he can fight Canelo in September, and then have a mandatory, a unification in between having to fight his next mandatory to the June.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
To fill out his DAZN contract. That's the only reason why.
Shout out to Curtis Henderson. He says, yeah, Jones got a little bit tired during the second half of that first fight between him
Big up to Curtis.
Tarver there. So Kevin McGriff said that Jonathan Banks said Golovkin had the flu. I think that was against the fight when he was fighting Derevianchenko or something like that. But yeah, that's a good point there on Rival Boxing Talk. if you get your mandatory out of the way, then you won't have to worry about it for the 12 months after you defend against the mandatory. So instead of having the mandatory called around that time of September, then just go ahead and get it out of the way as soon as possible so that, you'll be able to be cleared for that. But now here's my thing, and this is before this whole coronavirus and my corona COVID-19 the thing or whatever.
Rest in peace, bro.
Um, they hadn't really made a date for Golovkin versus Cesaro. Like nothing, I was like, well, if they're going to try to go ahead and get that fight out of the way, then they should have, locked that down so that you say, okay, let me have this fight, and then you fight Canelo in September, and you wouldn't have to worry about it.
They were looking to fight after Canelo, so they were waiting on the date of the Canelo fight.
The Canelo fight. Yeah, gotcha.
And Canelo hadn't signed yet. That's all.
Yeah, Mike had to step off here a little bit. Curtis said the thing about Roy Jones. Jones should have said at heavyweight, he dropped back down to light heavyweight. He lost 25 pounds of muscle mass.
100%.
Real quick about that. Roy Jones could have been part of one of the biggest fights in boxing around that time. After he defeated Andy Ruiz, John Ruiz, God darn it. After he defeated John Ruiz, they were talking about him potentially fighting the likes of Evander Holyfield or Lennox Lewis. But there was another fighter that he could have fought at heavyweight, and it was Mike Tyson. Now, if y'all look around YouTube, there is a thing with Jay Prince, The Art and Science of Respect. And there is one part in his, audio memoir where it says Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones. And he goes over like how he had both Mike and Roy together and they were going to negotiate and make the fight happen. And he was working on, trying to make that fight, get somewhere to secure the fight. And it would have been like at the Palms Casino or something like that. I think the Maloof brothers were willing to put up the money, right? And when they put up the money, the split wasn't good enough for Roy Jones. Mike Tyson was willing to take that money, but Roy Jones was not. And so as a result, Roy Jones ended up going back down to, like heavyweight. And of course you have the you got any excuses tonight, Roy? And the rest is history there. So if y'all can look up that thing real quick, The Art and Science of Respect by Jay Prince, or just look up Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones and look up the Jay Prince joint, and you'll get the whole lowdown on that. Curtis, if you can, got the link there below. So you can connect on and then be able to join in the boxing talk there. But like I said, with the topic here, man, why Golovkin is overrated. I mean, I get a lot of talk when it comes to Gennady Golovkin, and I say, when I tell people like Golovkin is overrated, they're like, oh my God, no he's not, no he's not. But when you go over his resume as a
it's not great. It's not great.
It's not great.
Can I give a quick stance on Golovkin myself?
All right.
I think he's underrated and I think he's overrated. I think he's underrated in today's middleweight climate over the last 10 years, and I think he's overrated in terms of the all-time middleweight climate. If you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, when it comes to overall history of middleweight boxers, right?
Monzon, Hagler, Harry
Carlos,
Greb.
Harry Greb, Bernard Hopkins,
Sugar Ray Robinson himself
Sugar
at
Ray
middleweight.
Robinson, yeah, like his,
Basilio, Zale, etc.
So yeah, Harry Greb, James Toney. They got the likes of a Gene Fulmer, Emil Griffith, Dick
Oh, Emil
Tiger.
was a special fighter, man. I look at what he did at 147 and 154 as well before he got to 160. He was more faded at 160.
Yeah, he was. He was. So yeah, in comparison to those guys, Randolph Turpin was he was an underrated guy. Randy Turpin, man, like Randy
Good
Turpin.
fighter, very good.
Yeah, he was a good fighter, man. He had those fights with Sugar Ray Robinson, man. He was getting the best of Sugar Ray Robinson, but that was like the early 1950s when Sugar Ray Robinson. But but think about this though. He had a fight against Sugar Ray Robinson in July of 1951 when Sugar Ray Robinson was 129 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was able to defeat Sugar Ray Robinson with that type, man. Like that's just craziness, man.
Only the second man to ever beat him.
Yeah, second man to ever beat him. That's that's just craziness there, man. But yeah, going into Gennady Golovkin and his overall place in middleweight history, yeah, he's kind of like overrated in that sense. But underrated, I guess, because of the guys that he wasn't able to fight here. So real quick, I think we got him on. Curtis, what's good?
Hey, what's going on, Boxing Swords? I don't think you're familiar with me. Me and Unrivaled Boxing Talking News, we used to do a show together, man. Unrivaled is one of the few guys on YouTube that understands the sweet science. He's a boxing phenom. You only have a few of us, Boxing Librarian Beat, myself and Scrapbook Boxing, Stormy B-Man too. But, he can break down fights. And, we have a show, me, Scrap, and Stormy B-Man called The Three Wise Men of Boxing every other Saturday. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. We talk about the history of boxing. We may talk, we go deep. We'll talk about Marcel Cerdan and Billy Patrol and Jimmy McLarnin and my favorite Italian fighter of all time, Tony Canzoneri, Mickey Walker. So Unrivaled can tell you something about me. But Mark, what's going on with you, man?
Not much, man. I'm just chilling. I was reading up on Liberal Yard about an hour ago. And I sent people over here to have a little discussion on this is Triple G overrated topic,
Yeah, Triple G is a strange fighter, man. Has a strange career. Mm-hmm. I like Triple G, and you said something. I was talking to my wife. He's underrated and overrated at the same time. He looks great against C-level competition. B-level competition, he looks very good. A-level competition, that's what I got a problem with. Mm-hmm. Danny Jacobs, he wasn't so tentative. He would have beat Triple G easy. The Canelo fights are hard to score. It's the irony, because I was just looking at the second fight literally an hour ago. It could have went either way. He did hurt Canelo in that fight briefly, very briefly. But he's a strange fighter, man. He's not a great fighter. He's a very good fighter. HBO tried their best to promote him, but he just didn't take to the American fan base. The Eastern European fighters, they really didn't take to the American fan base. But he will go down as a good, solid fighter. Now, they had on YouTube, they had this thing where he would have beat Marvin Hagler. Now, that's crazy, because Marvin Hagler.
Oh my goodness.
I still see some of his family members. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, a hardcore boxing town. And Marvin grew up here. Then he went to Massachusetts with the Petronelli brothers. Mm-hmm. But, Triple G wouldn't beat guys like Marcel Cerdan, Carlos Monzon, because of the reach and that powerful right hand. And what made Hagler great, he could fight long range. like he did in the beginning of his career. I saw him fight a couple of times at the Spectrum. And I lived in Pennsylvania for a year. My father was a boxing historian.
Spectrum, man. The Spectrum. Shout out to Willie the Worm, man. Rest in peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And the middle, when he lost to Antifermo, he famously said, "These are going to be my judges." And he raised his hand. Marvin changed his style. He became a slugger. He was a boxer puncher, and then he puncher boxer. So you look at the Hagler fights, I mean, the Hearns fights and the Mugabe fights, so that what made Hagler unique. But, this is a very good topic talking about Triple G.
Yeah, and it's something where, I kind of like bring it up because in the course of, me doing podcasts, there are two fighters that I criticize the most. One is Deontay Wilder, and the other is Gennady Golovkin. And my thing with Gennady Golovkin is that I kind of like have him as being catered to for the majority of his professional career. And I just, ran through his resume where, he fought like, Nilson, Julio Tapia, and, Milton Nunez in order to get his first world title. And this is like after he had an extensive amateur background where in comparison to Vasyl Lomachenko, where Vasyl Lomachenko, got to fight for a world title within his third professional fight, Gennady Golovkin was fighting guys that were like 1-22 or 1-10 or 9-4-2 before he even kind of like stepped up to, well, quote unquote stepped up to fight Milton Nunez. And I had another guy on here through YSM Sports Media, and we kind of brought up the topic of why wasn't Gennady Golovkin able to fight like he wasn't able to fight the guy where he had the thing with Daniel Jacobs, but Daniel Jacobs was fighting for world title at that particular point, but then he lost the interim, I mean not the interim title,
the regular title to Pirog.
Regular title to Dmitry Pirog. And that was the same time that Gennady Golovkin fought for the interim WBA title. So what my thing was like, why couldn't they match up Dmitry Pirog and Gennady Golovkin around that particular time for the WBO title, whether it was vacant or not? You know what I mean? So even after that, Dmitry Pirog still had fought a couple of years before he had his injury. So there had to have been a point in time where he would have been able to fight Dmitry Pirog, and it never came to fruition.
Well, they were trying to build it a little bit. You know the way fights get marinated?
Right.
Yeah, so fights get marinated. Obviously, Pirog in 2012, his last win was over Ishida. So that was his last fight. In 2012, Golovkin, was he in 2012 to regular, or was it earlier or after?
Interim in 2010. He fought for the interim title first.
And he was
then he was elevated to the regular title in the next fight.
Yeah,
in the next by the next fight, yes.
And we do know that like the WBA regular and the WBO weren't considered unification. What they were looking to try and do with Golovkin was get him the Felix Storm fight. But Storm had no interest, and Storm went and he fought against Gill and lost. So and then Pirog tragically his back went, unfortunately, because that's a fight that I think for this era of middleweights, especially the 2012 through 2014 era, 2010 through 2014, that fight could have really solidified either Golovkin or Pirog, either one of them as the number one middleweight in the world at the time.
Pirog was going to be Golovkin.
We'll never know. We'll never know.
No, Golovkin really benefited from Pirog having that injury and that crash, but You know, Pirog was really coming on in his career, man. You know, you see how he handled Danny Jacobs. You know,
yeah.
and you see the hard time that Golovkin had with Jacobs. Jacobs lost. Golovkin didn't win the Jacobs fight. Jacobs lost that fight. Jacobs just doesn't have dog in him. He's very tentative. He doesn't seize the big moment. And Pirog knock Danny Jacobs to kingdom come. You know, that was no fluke. You know, people say the cancer and his grandmother. You know, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered. Pirog was a very, very good fighter. And we'll never know, but I would have favored Pirog against Golovkin at that time.
Yeah, I would have favored Pirog too. I mean, I think with Golovkin, he is. I've said it before. He's like a straightforward fighter, and you know, if you do like force him to fight off his back foot, he's going to have a lot of problems. So I think Pirog with his overall power, and as long as he's able to take a punch, then he would have been able to back up Golovkin. And you see, like, with Jacobs, Jacobs was able to send and trade a couple of times with Golovkin, and stick up and take those punches from Golovkin. So I think Pirog would have been able to, eventually walk him down. Now, I had a question that was up earlier in reference to Golovkin and how he would do against two particular fighters. It was brought up Jermaine Taylor and Kelly Pavlik at middleweight.
Wow.
With Jermaine Taylor and Kelly Pavlik, fought each other with Kelly Pavlik winning by knockout. But they wanted to see they wanted to see like how Golovkin would do against either one of those guys.
Well, Jermaine's an odd case because after B-Hop, like he capitulated. You know what I mean? His career just went to kingdom come. But for me, I always felt like I always actually thought Triple G would beat Pavlik, and I always thought Jermaine Taylor would beat Triple G just because of the back foot game of Taylor. I think his movement, subtleties, the way he could hook to the body, he'd cause problems. What about you, Kurt? I think Kurt's on mute.
Here I go. I didn't want to make any noise. I was on mute. I think Golovkin knocks out Jermaine Taylor. There's been very few champions, who's been knocked out brutally. Abraham, Pavlik, Frock. Taylor lacked intangibles. He didn't have the best chin. He faded second half of the fight. His best way to win was to out-hustle Golovkin like he did Hopkins, but Golovkin's pressure and body punches would have did Jermaine Taylor in. Kelly Pavlik, it would have been a tough fight. I wanted to see Pavlik come to the Garden and fight the Irish fighter from New York. He has a boxing show in New York with Mark Breland. John Duddy.
Irish John Duddy,
yeah. Pavlik would have beat him because I didn't like Duddy's defense, but it would have been a tough fight, but I would have favored Golovkin over Pavlik and Taylor.
Interesting. Like I would have had him favored over Taylor, but I would have had Pavlik. I think I would have had Pavlik winning. I think Pavlik was a big guy, fairly big at middleweight, and so I don't think that Golovkin would have been able to use what he uses in this case against a guy that with the size of Kelly Pavlik in order to get the win there.
I will say this real fast. I need to put a caveat on me picking Jermaine Taylor over anybody, right? First of all, I was a massive Jermaine Taylor fan. Like, I'm talking, I was a diehard Jermaine Taylor fan.
Well,
so my opinion.
Yeah. Well, me, I thought in the first fight, I thought that Bernard Hopkins defeated Jermaine Taylor. And then, when the decision came down, the most excited person there was Lou DiBella. Lou DiBella was almost like jumped all the way out of the stadium once that decision came down, man. I was like, oh, goodness. But there was the thing with Gennady Golovkin, too, that people were talking about when Abel Sanchez was talking about Gennady Golovkin fighting all the guys from 154 to 168, And at that time, I had made like a little bit of a meme of sorts or something like that, and I said like, he would fight these guys at 168 or 160, and so you had the likes of Carl Froch at 168, Little Chavez at 168, Miguel Cotto at 160. Canelo Alvarez at 160, Floyd Mayweather Jr. at 154. But when it came to Andre Ward, he wanted a catch weight of 164 pounds. So he's like, 164. You know what I mean? It just seemed like he didn't really want it to have that fight against Andre Ward.
No, he didn't.
And that fight against Andre Ward, it had to be at a catch weight of 164 pounds. And I'm like, wait a minute. You would have fought Little Chavez around that same catch weight. You were pretty much ready to fight Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. at 164 pounds at catch weight, but it just ended up, being canceled out. But when it comes to Andre Ward, you had to put up a stipulation when Andre Ward had already been established as the best super middleweight, in the division. And yet you wanted to, have some extra stipulations on there in order to fight Andre Ward. You know what I mean? And I think, Ward was talking about that too, because they were talking about the whole thing with the 154 to 168, and he was like raising his hand up, saying like, "Hey, I'm somebody," and he didn't want to fight him.
That would have been a bad matchup for Golovkin Ward. Ward is a boxer, but he's rough on the inside. He'll hook your arm and hit you with uppercuts, but he can move. He showed you how tough he was against Kovalev the first fight. You see how better he got in the second fight because the rust was knocked off. He was sandbagging Golovkin. He wasn't never going to get in the ring with Ward. Ward would have beat the hell out of him. And you know why boxing's so interesting? Because of styles. Certain guys is just no good for other guys. Like the aforementioned Taylor and Hopkins. You beat Hopkins by forcing the pace. You don't let Hopkins fight at his pace. That's why Jermaine Taylor beat Hopkins 2 times, and he could be he could beat nobody else. And when you look at matchups like Ken Norton and Muhammad Ali, Norton arguably won all 3 fights. He won that fight at Yankee Stadium, but because of Ali's name, Ali got the nod. Then you look at Vernon Forrest and Shane Mosley. Vernon Forrest was beating Shane Mosley like a rented mule ever since the amateurs. Then they fight twice, and Vernon Forrest beat Shane Mosley, and then turn around and lose to a very crude Ricardo Mayorga.
Yeah,
about styles. That's why boxing is so interesting. And Jermaine Taylor didn't have a good chin at all. And I predicted. Somebody asked me about the Pavlik fight, and I said I like Pavlik in 7 or 8 rounds by knockout. I just knew it, and Pavlik won. And speaking of Carl Froch, before we get back on, he's one of the most underrated fighters ever to come out the UK. And on my show,
I hate Carl Froch.
Oh man, Carl Froch. I know he's arrogant, but Carl Froch, he can fight. He can fight, Mark. And one of my
I know he can, but I hate him.
Mark
will be Froch versus Calzaghe at 168. Dream fight.
Hey, Mark, I think Curtis Anderson was one of those 80,000 fans that were in attendance.
No, but actually, I was there. I lost mad money on George Groves, bro. I lost mad money. I'll tell you the reason why I hate Carl Froch, right? That stoppage over Taylor. I get it. It's a fair stoppage, but it took me 4 years to accept it.
Oh, man.
One of the most underrated fighters ever to come out the UK. One of the underrated fighters ever, can do any and everything. To fight off the back foot, to fight aggressively. He could do it all. I've been studying his career since day one. I said, man, this guy can fight. And one of my dream fights would be Joe Calzaghe versus Carl Froch.
I got Joe beating him on volume, but I get you.
overall volume, I think Joe Kawasaki would win. I think it would kind of be a little bit similar to
Hell of a fight, though.
Kawasaki's fight against Mikhail Kessler.
Possibly.
To me, for Kawasaki's career, that was like the one fight that I think that was the best fight for me to see Kawasaki. And I'm not really much of a fan of Kawasaki, but that fight that he had against Kessler, that was to me the one where it kind of was a little bit close, and then Kawasaki was able to separate himself from Mikhail Kessler in order to get that win. But going back to the thing with Andre Ward and Gennady Golovkin, this was the article that was in 2014 with Andre Ward when he was going through the rift between him and Goosen. And one of the topics that was brought up was Andre Ward at the time potentially moving up then after doing his work over at 168 pounds. And here he was saying I'm not a light heavyweight. There's been a lot of noise about Kovalev. That's one fight, and it's not even a pay-per-view fight. And then he says when he goes there and he beats Kovalev, then they're going to say he's just a puncher and one-dimensional. Where do I go from there? He says he's stuck at the light heavyweight division. And he said, hey, there are options. Gennady Golovkin's an option. Chavez is an option. But those guys have been allowed to circumvent fighting the best guys. Golovkin has built his reputation on fighting anybody. I raise my hand and say, I'm somebody. Let's do it. And then there's nothing. They circumvent and try to go to Chavez. And they say first you want to stay at 160 and clean it out, then they go to Chavez and Chavez falls through, and then they're on to something else. That's fine, but how can you build your reputation on one thing, and then when somebody stands up and says, let's test that, then you want to, have some other thing, going down. So, I mean, looking at that was at 2014. And Ward basically predicted what would happen with him if he moved up to light heavyweight. He would go up and he would fight Kovalev, and then after Kovalev, there would be nothing. And that's basically what it was. After he defeated Kovalev twice, he ended up retiring. So, the thing with Golovkin, man, we'll have to see what happens here over the the next few months once everything clears up and everything like that. He has that fight September 12th, 2020 over at AT&T Stadium. That's going to be interesting to me. AT&T Stadium. It's not going to be in Las Vegas. I don't know how that's going to work out. But from a business standpoint, I'm going to open this question up. From a business standpoint, how big do you think Canelo Golovkin 3 is right now?
I don't think it's that big. I think the only thing that kind of helps it this year is if it happens in September, with the lack of fights that will be happening leading up to it. I think that may help it with the lack of sporting events that are happening. Because of the coronavirus. I think that could help it. But the other thing I think that goes against it is, the whole lockdown, the capital crush, money financially. I don't know how big it is. Maybe because it's on an app that's quite affordable, that may help it out. It's not going to be a pay-per-view fight. So it's going to rely heavily on gate,
You know what, though? I think, speaking of that, now since a lot of the world is quote unquote on lockdown and everything and people are stuck at home, I mean, you would think that they would try to get some type of surge when it comes to new subscriptions to have content that people would be able to watch. So
I personally think boxing is in a great position, if I'm being honest, because team sports can't be played,
Right.
So one-on-one fights can. And I personally think boxing should make as many fights, even if it's behind. I know the atmosphere is so important, and I know people will go against me, but to bring in just sport fans, because there is nothing to watch. I don't care. Put a new way Casemiro on in the studio, wrap a green screen about them, and have those motherfuckers fight in a volcano.
Yeah, man. You know what I'm saying? I don't care if the Nevada State Athletic Commission doesn't do anything or doesn't sanction the fight. Just put them on there. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you this: would you watch Joshua versus Pulev inside a swamp?
I would watch it anywhere, man. I would watch
Like,
it in a
I'll watch
forest.
any of
I
these
would
fights
watch it
anywhere once I can
here.
watch some damn boxing. I'll
Yeah,
pay for them. I'll pay for nearly every fight that's kind of
exactly.
okay at that
But
stage.
to me personally, I don't. There's a reason. To me, I feel that there's a reason why this is being done, but in the same time, it's overblown.
Hmm.
But this kind of like affected me because last week I was slated to cover the Shakur Stevenson Miguel Mariaga fight over at the theater in Madison Square Garden, right?
Oh, you were going
So
to cover that?
yes. So what happened was Thursday they were having a press conference, and I'm like, I had to leave from the Washington D.C. area to go over to New York. So I left early in the morning, and that previous night, I didn't get the news of what was happening as far as like the sporting events were concerned.
Hmm.
So they had the news of the college basketball conference tournaments. They're basically either not having it in front of fans or basically shutting it down. So I was like on the way to New York, and then by the time I reached New York before the press conference started, that's when they basically canceled like the ACC tournament and they canceled the Big East tournament. So Madison Square Garden at that particular time was supposed to be packed because Big East tournament is like one of the biggest, basketball conference tournaments in America. So they had basically canceled that and they went ahead with the press conference. So on this channel, I have, uploaded the press conference that happened with Top Rank. So you'll
Hmm.
have Karma ready at the beginning saying, due to the effects of COVID-19 coronavirus, this fight is going
Yeah.
to be, shown or done with only media involved in there, anything like that, right? So they go ahead, they go through it at the press conference, and everything is complete and I do my little interviews and whatnot. And actually, I was going to head back to the DC area, and then the next day just come back for the weigh in and the fight.
Then
By
you're not allowed.
by the time I got back to the DC area, that's when I received the email that says they're canceling the whole thing. I was like, oh my goodness, this is some of the stupidest stuff I've ever heard in my life. But it was like this whole thing, man. Hopefully, it all blows over. Like, there's a whole lot of opinions on what's really going on and whatnot. But people right now being confined in their homes or whatever it is, hopefully they have enough patience depending on, who they're with or if they're with anyone, if they're with, kids, if they're with their significant other or whatever it is. Hopefully they have a moment of peace while they are quote unquote quarantined in there. So that's, basically the gist of it right now. But real quick, before I like kind of sign out, first off, shout out to Mark here of Unrivaled Boxing Talking News. Be sure to subscribe to his channel, and brother Curtis Anderson here. Be sure to check him out as well. Thank them for coming on YSM Sports Media. Thank them for coming on. Mike Grady is a contributor to the podcast, the Boxing Source Radio Show. So we have our shows Sunday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on usually on Blog Talk Radio, but then later on I provide it for those that are listening on iTunes or Google Podcasts, so you can subscribe to the podcast through those channels as well. So before I roll out, anything y'all wanted to bring up before I go?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me on. I left a couple of channels, man, because I just want to say, man, this is a great platform, but you'll be amazed how boxing can make people look like idiots, man. And I couldn't do it anymore. And this is extreme, man. I can't tell you the channels, maybe behind the scenes, but I'm glad you invited me on. It feels good to talk about boxing. I don't have to go to the gyms. I was very active in the boxing gyms in Newark, and the bars would talk about the old school guys. I could stay in my living room it feels good. You know, you got a good show, Boxing Source. Keep up the good work, and thanks for inviting me on. Salute to the chat. Love all you guys, man, and let's keep the sweet science alive, man.
Right.
Study your history. Yep.
All right, Unrivaled. What you got?
I echo what Kurt says. Study your history, and also this guy who's been asking for us to do this fantasy fight for like 20 minutes.
Oh, the Jack Dilla versus Golovkin. I think I posted it on here.
We were talking though.
Yeah, so he was like Jack Dilla versus.
That's a moot fight. That's a moot fight. Look, Dylan was a light heavyweight at his peak. He went up to heavyweight. He was a middleweight. I mean, come on. I mean, will I rattle off a few names of Dylan?
Yeah.
Yeah, he beat George Chip 9 times, Mike Twin Sullivan, Bob Moha 3 times, Levinsky 6 times, Frank Klaus Almacoy twice, Leo Florian Hook twice, Billy Misk. He fought Greb twice, losing to Greb twice. He beat Furman, Jim Flynn, Willie Bremen, Jack Twin Sullivan, and Gumboat Smith. So I'm gonna go ahead and say Dylan would whoop up on Triple G.
Would destroy, would straight up walk through him.
Before I go, Source, I'm going to sign off. Source and Mark, I got a middleweight who will beat the Bejabbers out of Golovkin. His name is Freddie Steele. Chat, look him up. Freddie Steele was a monster.
Oh yeah, Freddie Steele was an amazing fighter. We've talked about Freddie Steele in the past, Curtis.
Yeah, man. Yeah, GB Box should give you a shout out, Curtis, man. He said he was following you since the world breaker days. So
wow.
Yeah. So I guess that's going way back, right there, man. But yeah, that basically concludes this particular talk. I usually have like a midweek report on Wednesdays, but with the inactivity in the sport of boxing, the only thing that I would have been talking about was the news of Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez scheduled to fight September 12th, 2020 at the AT&T Stadium in Irving, Texas. So I just had this topic up for people to talk about, and you could look on the YouTube channel for other things that I have on here. Previous, like the last few podcasts, I've had Shannon the Cannon Briggs on, and I've had Riddick Big Daddy Bo on the podcast there. So you could check out the segments that I've had with those former fighters, and we'll see what happens here over the next few weeks when it comes to the sport of boxing and with the world in general, because this little topic with this COVID-19 is kind of like blown up, so to speak. So if there's like any other topics that I could, come up with, I'll, let people know. I'll schedule a live session, and then we'll just talk boxing. But like I said,
you can piggyback off this. You can piggyback off this and say greatest eras of middleweights.
That's one that I could, do there, where just going through those particular eras in the middleweight division, and just go through the fighters that fought in those eras, and we'll be able to dissect all of those there. So like I said, once again, thanks for everyone that has participated with this chat there on YouTube, and those that have come on to speak here through StreamYard. So until next time, folks, peace out.
Peace.
Peace.